Hey there, Internet friends. Trevor Starkey here with another episode of What I Feel Like Fridays, the weekly show where I sit down and talk about whatever I feel like. Real quick, I want to give a thank you to everybody who was inspired by last week's episode about talking about my hiatus and fears and whatnot to share their own experiences with me. It meant a lot to see kind of that I'm not alone in this. And I know I'm not, and I knew I wasn't. I was very touched that people shared their stories or reached out to me personally to share their support of me and my journey through this. So this week I wanted to touch on the idea of investing in yourself. Now I'm not talking necessarily like setting up a Roth IRA or 401ks, but you should definitely do that. Old man Trevor putting on his hat, you should definitely do that if you want to have, money and retire someday. Do that while you're young. Yes. But more specifically, I'm thinking about in the idea of setting a goal, setting your mind to something, and really making sure that you invest the time and sometimes money that you need to achieve those goals. Now for me, and this whole journey that I'm on, that started a little bit at the original PlayStation experience in 2014. When the original PSX was announced, I was just celebrating that I'd found myself in a new position, new job, where I was making twice as much as I'd really ever been making in my professional career before. And so I decided to treat myself with going to this event up in Vegas. I figured it was close enough by, I could just kind of drive up there for the weekend, go see what this PlayStation Experience thing was going to be about. I've been a fan of PlayStation since the early days, and I really wanted to go and celebrate that. And at that first PlayStation Experience, I didn't talk to anybody. I went to a bunch of panels, I played a few games. That was where I first met Greg and Colin from Kinda Funny, before they were doing Kinda Funny. But that weekend was also the point where I came home and said, this is what I want to do. And then a month later, Greg, Colin, Tim, and Nick left IGN, started Kinda Funny, and kind of acted as a catalyst for my own journey. Now, some people may remember the first thing I ever did with Kinda Funny, and the first thing that kind of got my name in the community, so to speak, was the now defunct Kinda Funny Book Club. I was on the second episode of that show, talking with Colin about Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And even going on to that, I looked at as an investment in myself. I know this is one of Colin's favorite games. I'd never played it up until that point, but I sat down, played through it for the conversation, took copious notes of what I kind of wanted to bring to the table, and said, if I can kind of hold my own in this conversation, that's a great start. That's a great kind of stepping stone. Let's see where I can go from there. And even that I kind of viewed as dipping my toes in the water, because before we even went live with that, I jumped out of the tier of that. After my Patreon money went through, I jumped right into the going on the Gamescast tier, to which Greg immediately sent me a message saying, are you fucking crazy, or something to that effect. And that was a result of getting a healthy tax return back and saying, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to, again, invest in myself and see if I can hold my own in a conversation about video games with some of the biggest names in video games. And that's really how I've looked at a lot of what I've done over the last couple years. Right after that first Kinda Funny Live and then my appearance on the Gamescast, I was back in San Francisco a month later for the IGN house party that was celebrating Beyond 400 and Unlocked 200. And so there I was getting to see IGN people who I had just met a month earlier who had come to the Kinda Funny thing, or I'd gotten a tour of IGN, and so I was getting to see them again so soon, and they were starting to remember me. Later that year, I plopped down, invested in TrevorTrove.com, started doing that, which gets to another piece of this puzzle, is that it's not always money, it is the time. You have to be willing to invest the time in pursuing these goals, and that can often be even more valuable. When I was writing every day, that was probably an hour or two of writing, plus the hours gaming, consuming gaming news, so I had something to talk about and something to write about. Even continuing on now with these videos, it's about an hour or two typically for every one of these videos. It starts out with a half hour-ish of me talking to a camera, kind of rambling my thoughts, and then another hour or so editing out all of the Obama-esque pauses to give you kind of a nice, short, concise video. And that takes time. And when you're juggling a full-time job, that time is a significant investment. And then there's all the time that goes into preparing for the videos, watching anime or wrestling or movies or TV, all that stuff, reading comics. That all takes time too. Playing the games, of course. So about a month into my daily writing for Trevor Trove, the next PlayStation experience came up, and that was the year it was in San Francisco. And so that meant that was the third time that year that I'd been in San Francisco. And by that third time, when I showed up at IGN or a Kind of Funny event and IGN people were there, they remembered me. They remembered who I was. They remembered the conversations we'd had in the past. And that networking was the investment starting to pay off. Now fast forward another 8 months where I had gone to every one of the 2016 United States PAXs. I'd started with PAX South, I went to PAX East, and then I went to PAX West, and at PAX West was where, again, through being out there and putting myself out there and doing work, I got the offer to come and do some freelance stuff for IGN. That was, as I touched on last week, an incredibly amazing and yet terrifying experience, but most of all, I looked at it and said, this is the investment that I've been making paying off. This is the thousands of dollars I've spent going to these events starting to give me the slightest amount of dividends. And now I need to put the caveat out there, of course, don't go into debt to invest in yourself in this regard. I'm very fortunate in that I've got a well-paying job that affords me the ability to do as much as I do, and I'm fortunate in that I live in Phoenix, and it's only an hour or two to get to LA or San Francisco, and the flights are really cheap. And I've also got very little in the way of, external commitments. Back when I had a girlfriend at the beginning of 2016, PAX was almost entirely off my radar. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to be taking those trips out to Boston or to Seattle. But we broke up, and suddenly I found myself with more disposable income. So I'm certainly not saying go break the bank on doing this stuff. If investing in yourself means buying new equipment or going to an event, make sure that you're doing it responsibly and saving up if you need to save up. Cutting out other expenses if you need to kind of use that to raise the funds. And lastly, and this is probably the most important, you have to also have the mental preparedness to realize that you could put all this money out there, put all this time out there, and it could pay zero dividends. It's a hard truth, but it is a reality of the situation. Just because you put the money into it, it's like any investment, there's a risk-reward factor to it. You could have the emotional equivalent of the 2008 economic crash, and you put all this money out there, and then it just all falls out from under you, and you suddenly decide you're done with games or whatever your dream is. Dreams change. Before I was doing gaming stuff, I spent 10 years wanting to run my own theater company and working through kind of the same trajectory of that, investing money into those kinds of experiences. And then I got to a point where I said, nope, this isn't what I want to do anymore. So all of that capital I'd put in and all of the networking I'd done for theater stuff suddenly had very little value to me. And it was a write-off. So you have to always keep in the back of your head that that is entirely a possibility here. When you try and follow whatever your goal may be, your dreams might change. And so the money that you put into it might end up amounting to little or nothing. But hopefully you have good experiences along the way. Even if I never get into games, I've made incredible friends through all this stuff, and I've built up skills that I never thought I would have. And I've got stories to tell, and be it in theater or now in gaming, that's one of the things I love. I love being a storyteller. So don't ever be afraid to invest in yourself, but do it responsibly and realize that no matter how much you do, it's never a guaranteed thing. Thank you for joining me for another episode of What I Feel Like Fridays. Let me know what your goals and dreams are and how you've kind of invested in them yourselves in the comments below. As always, like, share, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.